you'll notice that one of my videos, and a company that I followed quite a bit at the beginning of the blockchain class and kept following them as they evolved, was the blockchain called Tradelens. And Tradelens was doing, it was doing well from a standpoint of the fact that it was getting engagement. They had 16 major companies that were involved in the evolution of the Tradelens blockchain. The problem is, it started before the pandemic, and they started putting it forward, and then all of a sudden, the pandemic happens, and there's social distancing and all the challenges that happen there. And they somehow survived getting through that to the point where in 2021, they had this huge amount of traffic that could be tracked on Tradelens. AP Moller, Maersk just had revenues go through the ceiling and really did well for 2021. Well, 2022 comes along, and you see the opposite side of that trough. You see, instead of this huge amount of business, now you see a declining amount of business. In fact, it went back below average. In fact, if you look at a lot of the retail data and shipping data, they had less containers shipped in December this last year than they had, or in the fourth quarter of last year, than they did in the third quarter of last year. And you can see that there was this really strong downward trend. In fact, I did a couple videos concerning the shipping going downhill and retail going downhill on my economics channel. The challenge with that, though, is that it puts a squeeze on revenues. When you put a squeeze on revenues, you put a squeeze on your expenses because you can't spend as much. So what happens here is, in this article, what you end up seeing is that Maersk and IBM was the blockchain side of the partnership. They were the developer side of the partnership. They went ahead and decided that it was no longer a commercially viable enterprise. Basically, they say Tradelens has not reached the level of commercial viability necessary to continue work and meet the financial expectation as an independent business. In other words, the fees paid in by the various participants were not large enough to cover the expenses. And like any business, they just decided, after it had been in business like almost 5 years, that since it's not commercially viable, they're going to move on. And of course, then, this is the official line here. And you always want to go to other places to see what may have happened, what other analysts see as their perspective. So let's look at a couple analysts, and let me poke fun at a couple of them that just don't know what they're talking about. Tradelens is the only successful deployment of enterprise blockchain in the public supply chain network. Hooey, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. I don't know where they get that information, because there's supply chain efforts for blockchain in the medical industry, in natural gas, in food, in various different sectors. I've made several videos concerning them. So at first, I read this first paragraph. I read this person's introduction and I say, okay, I guess I should care about it going away, but not for the reasons that she says. The problem? Ocean shipping companies are a wily bunch, unwilling to collaborate. Now that's actually true. The challenge is with all the shippers and with everybody involved, they're just a group of shippers that are just trying to skirt the laws no matter what they do. And this person supposes that they just couldn't corral and get enough collaboration among, a reasonable number of those companies to get together to actually collaborate and want to improve the network. So this person's assuming that they just couldn't get enough people to join it because there weren't enough people that cared or wanted to do things by the book and have it recorded. And you see what I'm saying? So yeah, that might be true. That might be true from what I understand in the ocean financing business, the trade finance they call it, and I did a couple of videos on the trade financing, is that the trade financing is about the same problem. The problem with that is that people aren't willing to pony up and just be honest. Not enough of them in that particular industry. When you get international like that, it's a theme I keep hearing in several different industries of what they're trying to solve in those industries to overcome the challenge of fraud and graft in the shipping businesses. So this one hits a familiar chord when she says that. Coming down here, even after a record year, and that's what I said at the beginning, unwilling to stay the course with Tradelens and fund potentially promising freight booking utility. Now, obviously, Laura here is bought into the viability of Tradelens and bought into the idea that it's a good thing for the supply chain industry, especially the ocean-going supply chain industry. I agree. I am just enamored with the good that they did with Tradelens, but I think it's a little bit disingenuous to say that Maersk was unwilling to stay the course. Yes, Maersk was footing the biggest part of the bill, and the problem is the economy, I think, is more what did it in than Maersk being unwilling. I mean, when you have a good year and then it's followed by what's going to be a horrible year when we hear the fourth quarter numbers coming out of Maersk, I think basically you can see the writing on the wall for large expenses like Tradelens. So that's what this said. And of course, IBM supposedly admitted its failure. It goes back to the same problem. Programmers overpromise and underdeliver. I think IBM really may have learned something by this to realize that, hey, we can only do so much and we shouldn't promise more than we did, whether or not that was really the cause here. She goes on to say that she feels that large trading, that it could be successful, but then she ends it with this crazy statement here. If large trading platform like IBM and Maersk cannot make a cross-industry trading platform and focus on long-term benefit, who can? Well, every place has a failure, especially when you're in the programming business, especially when you're striving to perfect new technologies. Everybody fails. And believe me, IBM will have learned more from this failure than they would have learned had it continued to succeed, because they'll look into it and see and look at the postmortem and see all of the various things that did or didn't happen during the time that they ran Tradelens that they could do better in the future. So here she identifies that failure was a limited vision. Yeah, that may be. At first, Maersk didn't want to let anybody in. And then after they wanted to let people in, their second largest shipping company didn't want to join because Maersk was the only player. It wasn't until after 4 others joined that competitor finally joined. So yes, it was a challenge to get it up off the ground. But, it goes on. This next one is just as funny as can be. I have to poke some fun at the next one here. Okay. Now, you'll notice that I have a love-hate relationship with the Motley Fool. I've called the Motley Fool foolish, or I have one video that says the Motley Fool makes fool of themselves because they don't know what they're talking about in the blockchain space. They don't know how to separate out the cryptocurrency information and data from the blockchain information and data. And so every time I see an article by them, I cringe. So if you want to post an article that you want me to poke fun at, go ahead and post that in the current events. But most of the time, the Motley Fool is a bunch of foolish people trying to figure out what the world is really all about. So they talk about this could be the end of enterprise blockchain. Well, okay, why would it be the end if one project fails? Okay, early success, but ultimate failure. They had some early wins, but by mid-2019, they had 5 of the 6 largest ocean carriers were using the platform. I'd call that success. That's one of those early wins. It looked like it was reaching enough people on it that it could go forward. Unfortunately, even with that initial traction, Tradelens failed to win over enough of the industry. And really, that's true. That's true. But they go on to make a fool of themselves by saying, well, this would be the death knell of the industry. And they come over here and say the Walgreens Boots Alliance was toying with the idea of using blockchain, and they decided not to. Well, of course, that's a reason why it's failing. The giant tech retailer Walmart used blockchain to trash produce. Yes, they have. And the challenge is there is you got a lot of producers out there that don't even have computers. And yes, that's a known difficulty that the CEO and the CFO of Walmart readily say when they go to consensus at the end of each year. And they talk about their blockchain initiative. The hardest part is getting involvement, getting people's participation. But that doesn't mean it's a problem with Walmart or a problem with the technology. They'll keep on working to solve those problems and go forward. So they finish with a dumb statement here to end it all. It says, while the crash in cryptocurrency prices, well, you know that they can't be talking anything that's truth because this is supposed to be a blockchain article and they're talking about cryptocurrency prices. Okay, where in the world is there a correlation between Tradelens and cryptocurrency prices? But they're going to try to draw one here. It says, prices has probably contributed to the cooling of interest in blockchain technology. No, it hasn't, because blockchain technology is barreling forward in a lot of respects. And the next segment that I do is going to show that to you. It's also becoming clear that the technology isn't a game changer after all. So I'll leave you with that because the Motley Fool just did it again.